Are we ready to roll?
Yeah, let's do it.
Tell us about breaking the set. I just couldn't resist going over and over to see the woman with the sledgehammer charging against the television set. It was far out. How did that come about, and how did you make a transition to the Empire Files?
So all started through anti-war activism, realized the media was an arm of the empire and being weaponized to basically overthrow countries and demonize basically activists who were trying to fight against imperialism. So I realized that I needed to create a media structure in order to challenge this corporate tyranny and U.S. regime change, right? And so I started Media Roots, and through that just started covering my own community. Long story short, Occupy Oakland popped off in my backyard in Oakland. This big police state presence just erupted. RT, Russia Today, was one of the only channels there legitimizing the movement. And I thought, this is very strange. Why is this international network the only network that is paying attention to Occupy Wall Street? So I became the liaison for that movement there. And they offered me a job to put my perspective out there on an international stage. And so I couldn't resist. And so coming from this activist lens, this anti-imperialist lens, I just went balls to the wall. I said, let's do a show called Breaking the Set, where we're breaking those pre-established narratives and coming out, mimicking mainstream media where you kind of look the part, but you just completely destroy all those preconceived notions, the conventional wisdom. America's founded on myths. And so just totally shattering all of the myths and really telling it like it is. And it was really fun to do it for a couple of years. But I transitioned into Empire Files because there's only so much you can really do confined in that studio space. Talking about the Palestinians and really what's going on there really drove me. I really want to go there and talk to these people. And so it just totally expanded my horizons. I was able to go and take that idea, that notion of breaking the set, but put it into a long-form investigative documentary series where we're going all around the world and getting the in-depth perspective and putting the historical context behind these issues. Because really, in this our soundbite-driven media world today, you just get a 5-minute segment, and it's really important to understand how we got here, because history is repeating itself and the stakes are higher than ever before.
You have no idea how much joy it brings to my heart to see your show with the subtitles in Spanish in Telesur.
Yes.
It's like a new day, like pure oxygen and a polluted environment. It's really, really cool. And I'm so glad that you did it. And we are willing to do whatever is necessary to make sure that you stay there. What can people do to either help you stay on Telesur or to become an independent outfit?
Yeah, so long story short is Trump's sanctions escalated exponentially, and really after the re-election of Nicolas Maduro, the sanctions completely seized Telesur's ability to pay contract journalists. And so for the last couple months, our ability to function as Empire Files has seized. And it's really important to maintain Empire Files because we're reclaiming those stories of marginalized and oppressed people around the world, challenging U.S. warfare, and really understanding every domestic and international issue through the lens of U.S. empire. We're the largest empire in the world, 900 plus military bases, largest polluter, et cetera, et cetera. We're squandering all the resources in the country. So that's really important to keep alive. We need to keep challenging these narratives. And, we can't let the Trump administration win by shutting this show down. So we've started a GoFundMe. We're trying to raise $50,000 there. We have a patreon.com/Empire Files. And you can go to the empirefiles.tv to see our entire body of work and really get a sense of why this show is so crucial.
So are you willing to bypass the system a little? If I can send money to my mom and my brother in Mexico by going to Western Union, why can't the Chavistas go to Western Union and send you a check? Or catch?
Yeah, well, they've thought of everything, unfortunately. The government has really thought of everything. So even though there's actually 5 countries that comprise of Telesur, they have seized every other country's ability to transfer funds in and out of those countries and in and out of Caracas. So I even told them, I said, I'll come with a suitcase, put bolivars in it, and I'll come back. But I think that they've really thought of everything, and they've really, really shut it down. And unfortunately, this is kind of a story that's gone under the radar. RT has kind of taken all the news from this disinformation warfare campaign, but this has really gone under the radar, this attack on Telesur, which has really been a thorn in the side of empire ever since Fidel Castro and Hugo Chavez created the network over a decade ago.
Now, Mike Prysner is a producer of the show these days.
Yes, he is.
Now, how did it start from, I think it was the Answer Coalition or even earlier version of that, as a peacemaker, and how did you make the transition into the Empire Files?
Yeah, I read I went from an activist to a journalist in a pretty quick period of time. But, you know, a lot of my activism was based around organizing soldiers and veterans, right? And so as a part of that, a lot of what I was doing was writing articles and newsletters and leaflets to be distributed on military bases. And so kind of doing anti-imperialist agitation directed at a particular group of people in the military and recently discharged from the military. And so when Abby and I linked together to create the Empire Files, it was kind of in that same vein as we're going to do agitation against the empire and against imperialism, but just to a broader audience. And then drawing on all the things I had learned from the movement, you know, being in the anti-war movement for a decade really gave me a real breadth of experience in understanding people's struggles and understanding the potential for victory as a united people's movement against what seems to be an unbeatable force. And so I kind of brought all those lessons from the political struggle into a media project. And I think it's, you know, we've been really proud of what we've been able to do because it's a new form of spreading information.
From breaking the set, the moment I saw it, I realized this woman has a presence, has a punch, and it's very challenging to be next to her, homie. So how do you manage to keep up?
Oh, man. Well, I definitely have learned a lot. I've been very lucky. I definitely am lucky to be mentored and taught by her all along the way, whipping me into shape, which I think has happened to some degree so far. But hey, it's lasted this long, so I didn't totally fail, huh?
Now, at one point when the Guarimbas were in blasting and killing people, intimidating, terrorizing human beings all over Venezuela, I understand that you guys paid a visit to the South American country either during or right after. So. And at one point, someone even told me that you were being harassed. Did that really happen?
Yeah, we had a deluge of death threats that had actually chased us out through a virtual lynch mob. And I say virtual because it was pretty much all on the internet telling them to lynch us. But, you know, we were wanted to be embedded in the protest to tell both sides of the story. I mean, unlike corporate media, which actually doesn't go and interview these Guarimba protesters that are masked and holding grenades and burning down food distribution warehouses and invading maternity clinics, I actually wanted to go and say, hey, why are you actually doing this? And I think the most telling part of that moment, when people came up and they said, who do you work for? And if we said Telesur, we probably would have gotten killed in the streets because Telesur has been a constant target of the U.S.-backed opposition there because of its affiliation with the state. But this one guy who was holding a pin grenade, shirtless, masked, and I said, why are you doing this? Why are you holding this grenade? And he said, I can't be an entrepreneur in the country. Mm-hmm. And I said, that's really strange because in America, we hear this narrative that there's a starving nation and they're trying to fight the government because they're all starving to death. But you look yoiked out like you're actually on steroids and you're trying to burn down a food distribution warehouse because you can't own a business. So it just became a little bit more murky than the narratives that we hear. But yeah, I mean, the U.S.-backed opposition there is no joke. I mean, you have people who are out there in the streets protesting without any government interference. But then you have these armed vigilante kind of masked terrorist wing that has given a wink and a nod from the opposition politicians. And they are just allowed to run havoc all over the entire country, commandeer 18-wheeler trucks, burn Afro-Venezuelans alive, target socialist enclaves and target state-run hospitals, etc. So it was very shocking to learn actually the truth because people like John Oliver and the corporate media will glorify these protesters and say, oh, they're holding back. No, they're not holding back. They were actually responsible for more than half of the deaths in that death toll that we saw being paraded around as Maduro gunning down unarmed protesters in the street. The lie is very big.
Now, I've been to Venezuela twice. I've spoken to milicianos, people who are on the ground, people who used to think that Hugo Chavez was too soft on the Yankee empire. You know, they're hardcore young Venezuelans who are ready to do anything just to provide the maximum amount of happiness for their people. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I just fully sympathize with that. What is, Mike, for you, what is the biggest sin, the biggest challenge that Venezuela presents to the United States' interests in Latin America?
Well, of course, you know, they have that fatal combination. They have the world's largest oil reserves and untapped raw materials. So that's the one side that puts them on the hit list. But then the other thing is that they have an independent government that refuses to bow to the dictates of Washington, the dictates of Wall Street, and they don't allow themselves to be plundered by U.S. capital and be a staging ground for the U.S. military to launch wars against other independent countries in the region. So if you do those two things, if you have resources and you have independence, then you're high on the list to be attacked and overthrown and destroyed by the United States government. But that's not all. I mean, Venezuela is one of many countries that is independent and has a lot of natural resources. But Venezuela is such a focus and was of the Obama administration, but even more so the Trump administration, because it's the linchpin for regional unity. I mean, the idea of organizing outside the World Bank, outside the IMF, and developing your countries on a pan-Latin American basis versus one that's subjected to the dictates of U.S. capital, that is very dangerous. And so the U.S. government knows that not only will they reap the massive rewards of stealing all of Venezuela's oil if they're able to have a coup government come in, but it's also going to break up this alliance across Latin America, of which Venezuela is the center in a lot of ways. They want to destroy all of the progressive and left governments there, and they see Venezuela as a good starting point for that.
And we close with Abby. Given the Russophobia going on at this point, which somehow it affects all of us working in the alternative independent media, is this a replay of Joseph McCarthy's practices, or you feel that this is much, much bigger, much more threatening to our civil liberties and our civil rights worldwide and locally here in the United States?
It is a very perplexing notion because there is no communist threat, right? I mean, we're literally talking about an oligarchy, a capitalist oligarchy in Russia. It's very, very strange that they've resurrected the ghost of McCarthy to target leftists again. I mean, I can't imagine the people who were alive during the Cold War, what they think, because, people were ducking under desks, and now my mom told me, like, wow, I really do feel like this is the Cold War all over again, but there is no threat this time. So it's very perplexing that capitalist powers can completely invent this propaganda narrative. But I think that it's up to us and all leftists and progressives and activists who are affected by this, because the U.S. government has made it very clear that this is about cracking down on any content that, quote, sows discord or foments radical discontent. So what does that mean? Well, it means that it goes outside of this bipartisan foreign policy consensus pushed by the Washington Beltway. So anyone who falls outside of that paradigm is going to be challenging the core of the establishment, right? Because that's what the Democrats and Republicans can unite on more than anything. So they've used Russia as this Bond villain, as responsible for everything. And so, being written up in the DNI report as fomenting radical discontent, and all I did was really talk about real issues that people on KPFK talk about all the time, or Pacifica Radio. So that's the real threat, talking about the reality of this country, talking about how half the people in this country are living in poverty and living paycheck to paycheck. And so people need to understand where this is all going. People need to understand that these tech purges, these tech giants working in concert with the U.S. government, working with these think tanks that are stacked with defense contractors and CIA spooks and cops, that's all purposefully being curated for us. Our reality is being curated by tech giants working with the government to tell us what is the information that we can, basically to tell us what the truth is. And we need to be smarter than that. We need to band together and basically support alternative grassroots outlets that are not funded by right-wing billionaires, that are not putting all of our eggs in one basket on these social media platforms. We need to band together and have solidarity with the left, because the left is the ultimate target here. The right is not the threat to the establishment. The left is. And that's the target here. So you saw Black Agenda Report, Counterpunch, Truth Dig, all of these taking a hit with these new algorithms on social media. So let's be smart, let's be critical thinkers and media literate and understand that we cannot allow this to happen. And we also need to stand in solidarity with the sovereignty of these countries that are continuing to be undermined by CIA regime change operations and by the Trump administration. So standing in solidarity with our brothers and sisters around the world and standing up for and funding media and the journalists that we want to see thrive. Because at this point in this capitalist, late-stage capitalism, we cannot rely on anyone else to do it for us.
We've done co-productions with radio stations from different countries from Central and North America. In the past, we are planning on engaging doing, the way we do it is that our show is half an hour. They do 15 minutes live in our air. We do the next 15 minutes live in their airtime. And we are hitting two audiences at the same time. If you were willing, perhaps we could invite you to come in and be part of those multinational efforts.
Would love to. This is what we got to do. Let's do it.
You ready to play?
Let's
do it. Okay.
Let's rock and roll.
Okay. Thank you so much for taking the time.